After years of silence, Princess Anne has finally confessed the truth about King Charles III's final wish. In a private admission, the 74-year-old Princess Royal revealed that Charles, weakened by months of cancer treatment in 2025, made a shocking decision before passing his crown. His wish was not to hand absolute power to William, but to strategically reshape the monarchy for survival, acknowledging Harry, elevating Catherine, and excluding Camilla entirely. Anne's words, blunt and unflinching, confirm what insiders whispered. Charles gambled with tradition, leaving behind a legacy both brilliant and dangerous. The meeting at Windsor. On the evening of May 28, 2025, the gravel courtyard of Windsor Castle was unusually quiet. At exactly 7:15 p.m., two black Range Rovers pulled through the gates. Inside them sat Prince William, Catherine, and Princess Anne. Prince Harry had already arrived separately, entering alone just after 6:45 p.m. Meghan Markle, notably absent, remained in California. The meeting was private, restricted to the king's most trusted bloodline members, with Charles too weak from 6 months of cancer treatment to chair it himself. The atmosphere inside the Crimson drawing room was heavy with unspoken tension. William, aged 42, believed the gathering would be about succession planning. Harry, 40, entered the room reserved, his face tight, anticipating confrontation. Catherine, at 43, held herself with her usual calm poise, but aides later said her eyes betrayed wariness. Anne, at 74, sat apart from the others, her stoic silence signaling foreknowledge. When the king was wheeled in at 7:30 p.m., the air shifted. Charles looked frail but determined. His voice, once strong, was reduced to whispers. Instead of speaking, he handed Anne a sealed envelope. Anne, known for her bluntness and discipline, opened it without hesitation. She began reading aloud, her voice sharp and stripped of palace ceremony. In that moment, Anne became the king's messenger, carrying not just words, but the weight of a legacy. The announcement was unlike anything expected. Anne declared that Charles's wish was not to hand everything to William alone, but to strategically redefine each royal's role. The monarchy, weakened by decades of scandal, required survival through structure, not favoritism. The room fell into stunned silence. For William, Harry, and Catherine, everything they assumed about succession had just been shattered. The shock was not in William's confirmed status as heir, but in what came next. Charles had crafted a survival plan that redistributed power in ways no one anticipated. And as Anne read the details, the room's silence turned to disbelief. Charles's unexpected plan for the future. Anne's words carried an edge. Charles affirmed that William, aged 42, remained heir to the throne and would inherit the crown upon his passing. But instead of concentrating all power, Charles introduced a restructuring plan. Harry, though scarred by his memoir Spare, published in 2023, was to be symbolically acknowledged, visible, but not restored. The aim was to prevent future accusations of exclusion. For the first time in over 30 years, both brothers were explicitly written into the same royal framework. The plan was radical. Camilla, conspicuously, was absent from any mention. Her exclusion was as loud as any direct statement. Anne read without pause, clarifying that future influence would be centered not around consorts, but around the bloodline. Catherine, as Princess of Wales, was to become the monarchy's modern strategist, guiding William and shaping the crown's future. Their children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, were identified as the monarchy's long-term symbols of renewal. Harry's status was the most unusual. He would be included at select ceremonial events, maintaining visibility but stripped of decision-making power. Anne explained that this compromise was designed to balance acknowledgement with security. "Visible, not empowered," she read, repeating Charles's words. Harry's jaw tightened. To him, it was both an olive branch and a cage. The room's silence deepened. This was not the monarchy of old, where succession simply meant inheritance. This was Charles's attempt to rewrite the script, using his final years to redefine roles, not just titles. It was bold, disruptive, and dangerous. The announcement had changed not just who would reign, but how the monarchy itself would survive. But why would Charles, frail and nearing the end of his reign, choose such a bold and risky plan? The roots of his decision stretched back decades, shaped by history, trauma, and the shadow of illness pressing on every choice. The roots of Charles's decision. Charles's worldview had been forged in fire long before his coronation in May 2023. As a child, he witnessed his mother Elizabeth II unexpectedly take the throne in 1952, after Edward VIII's abdication left the monarchy shaken. That moment, her sudden isolation at just 25 years old, taught him that the crown could be both duty and prison. For decades, Charles carried the trauma of watching his mother endure alone, convinced he must find another way. The 1990s deepened his cynicism. The collapse of his marriage to Diana in 1992, the public firestorm of 1996, and her tragic death in 1997 scarred him permanently. He came to see duty not as stability, but as fragility, vulnerable to scandal and silence. Now, facing his own mortality, those memories shaped his urgency. He believed if he left everything to William without structure, history would repeat itself in another generation. Illness accelerated his resolve. Diagnosed with cancer in late 2024, Charles endured exhausting treatments across 7 months, missing dozens of engagements. At 76 years old, he privately confessed to aides that he might not live another 5 years. Mortality gave his decisions weight. He no longer thought in terms of tradition, but survival. His reign, brief and burdened, was about legacy, not power. By entrusting Anne to deliver his plan, Charles avoided palace spin and ensured his words carried blunt clarity. He resolved not to repeat history's mistakes. Instead of isolation, he chose distribution. Instead of favoritism, he chose inclusion. But as the family absorbed his words, it became clear. This was not a healing plan. It was a gamble, one that could preserve the monarchy or fracture it forever. And so the burden shifted to William, Catherine, and Anne. Each had been handed roles by Charles, but none carried the weight more heavily than William. For he was not just heir to the crown, he was heir to his father's gamble. The rise of William and Catherine as a new royal core. By the spring of 2025, even before the Windsor meeting, William and Catherine had already stepped into a new rhythm of responsibility. Since January, they had carried out over 80 engagements, nearly doubling their presence compared to the same period in 2023. Behind the scenes, advisors quietly referred to them as the operational core of the monarchy. While Charles battled illness, they were the steady pair filling gaps without complaint. Catherine's role evolved beyond consort. She had begun spearheading strategy, holding weekly meetings with palace communications officers and senior aides. Her initiatives in child welfare and mental health were reframed not as side projects, but as central platforms. By April 2025, commentators were already calling her the monarchy's modern face. Unlike Camilla, whose influence often stirred controversy, Catherine's presence inspired confidence across both traditional supporters and younger audiences. William, for his part, operated with restraint. He did not publicly question his father's frailty or Camilla's fading presence, but every step was deliberate. Operation Menai Bridge, the long-prepared succession plan, was activated quietly in February 2025, months earlier than expected. That meant William was already training in state-level preparation, reviewing treaties, and shadowing his father's briefings. Every handshake, every smile, every headline became both duty and rehearsal. By the time Anne read Charles's final wish, the shift was undeniable. William and Catherine were not just heirs. They were the emotional and operational backbone. The monarchy, once held together by Elizabeth's endurance, was now finding its center in the Waleses. It was not just succession, it was a transfer in real time. But if William and Catherine had been elevated, Harry's role was more complicated. His name was not ignored, but his power was absent. And for a prince who once stood shoulder to shoulder with William, the final wish was both recognition and rejection. Harry's position. Harry's arrival at Windsor on May 28, 2025, had already been notable, alone, without Meghan by his side. At 40 years old, he walked into the Crimson drawing room carrying more history than hope. Anne's reading of Charles's plan placed him in an unprecedented position. Acknowledged as a son, yet excluded from the monarchy's core. Charles's wording was deliberate. Harry would remain visible at ceremonies, trooping the color, Remembrance Sunday, and select jubilees. His role would be symbolic, a nod to inclusion, but without any decision-making authority. Anne repeated the line twice, visible but not empowered. It landed with the weight of finality. Harry's memoir Spare, published in 2023, lingered like a scar, an open wound that no restructuring could heal. For Harry, the compromise was bitter. It was not banishment, but it was not reconciliation either. He would be acknowledged, but never trusted again with influence. Even Meghan's absence underscored the reality. His position within the family was separate, conditional, and permanently altered. Palace aides later whispered that his eyes darkened as Anne spoke the words, a flash of pain that said more than any rebuttal. The message was clear. This was the best offer Harry would ever receive. He had been written into Charles's plan not as a player, but as a placeholder, there for appearances, not for power. And though no outburst followed, silence often speaks louder than fury. If Charles's plan was bold and William's burden heavy, Anne's role was equally pivotal. As the one chosen to deliver the king's words, she was not just a sister or an aunt. She was the enforcer, the trusted guardian of the crown's continuity. Princess Anne. At 74 years old, Princess Anne remained the monarchy's most disciplined figure. With more than 20,000 engagements since 1969, she had built a reputation for bluntness, loyalty, and action over words. Charles's choice to make her the messenger was no accident. She was respected across factions, feared by staff who knew her intolerance for nonsense, and trusted by her nephew William as a voice of stability. When Anne read Charles's words at 7:45 p.m. inside Windsor's Crimson drawing room, her delivery cut through emotion. There was no hesitation, no faltering. She made it clear this was not palace spin. It was the king's will. Even Harry, bristling at the terms, did not interrupt her. Catherine's calm composure reflected trust in Anne's authority, while William's gaze held steady on the aunt, who had just reinforced his father's gamble. Her role extended beyond reading. By delivering the final wish herself, Anne positioned the plan as serious, unshakable, and immune to manipulation. She was the reminder of Elizabeth II's legacy, the one royal who had worked alongside their mother for 70 years. In her presence, the plan became less about Charles's illness and more about continuity. For courtiers and the press alike, Anne's involvement was the seal of authenticity. She was not emotional, she was strategic. Her bluntness framed the plan as duty, not favoritism. And in doing so, she reinforced her lifelong role, the enforcer of the crown's survival, even when the message was unwelcome. But if Anne was the messenger and William the heir, Harry remained the unpredictable piece. What Charles hoped would be inclusion could just as easily spark retaliation. And behind the quiet of Windsor, aides already feared what Harry might do next. The monarchy's next threat. When Anne finished reading Charles's letter on May 28, 2025, Harry remained silent. He did not challenge the words, did not storm from Windsor Castle. Instead, he sat still for nearly 20 minutes, eyes fixed on the table. To outsiders, it looked like calm. But to those who know Harry's history, silence often hides storms. Insiders whispered almost immediately about the risk of retaliation. Harry had already shaken the crown once with his memoir Spare, published in January 2023. The book sold over 3 million copies in its first week, spilling stories of frostbitten marches in the Arctic and royal betrayals. Aides feared a second manuscript, perhaps already written, waiting for release after Charles's passing. Such a bombshell could devastate a monarchy still fragile from Camilla's sidelining and Charles's illness. The possibility wasn't just speculation. Friends of Harry recalled conversations from 2024, when he suggested Diana's story was only half told. That line has haunted aides ever since. What if Harry held details about Diana's final years? What if letters, notes, or family conversations resurfaced through him? The monarchy's greatest vulnerability has always been transparency forced upon it. And Harry knows this better than anyone. For William, the danger was clear. His father's final wish placed the burden of continuity in his hands, but that also meant shielding the crown from his brother. Every decision William makes from now on, whether to embrace, distance, or silence Harry, will shape the monarchy's survival. And as aides noted, Harry's next move could tip the monarchy from reinvention into ruin. Yet in the chaos of threats and speculation, one figure remained calm. Catherine's poise at Windsor, her silence under pressure, and her composure afterward transformed her from supportive consort into the monarchy's invisible strategist. Catherine's quiet but absolute influence. Catherine, now 43 years old, said little during Anne's reading of Charles's letter, yet every eye in the room drifted toward her. For palace aides, her silence was reassurance. For William, it was anchor. And for Charles, who trusted her judgment, it was proof that the monarchy's future had not only an heir but a stabilizer. Her influence had been growing quietly for years. Since 2020, Catherine has led initiatives on children's mental health, launching programs that reached over 150,000 families. By 2024, her patronages had expanded into education, health, and climate awareness, making her the monarchy's most trusted public figure after Elizabeth II's passing in 2022. But Windsor marked a new stage, her transition from consort to strategist. Behind closed doors, aides describe her as the emotional firewall. While William wrestles with legacy and Harry with rebellion, Catherine absorbs pressure and steadies the palace. On May 29, 2025, the morning after Windsor, she hosted a small reception at Kensington Palace. Guests noted her warmth, her humor, and her calm, as though nothing seismic had happened. It was performance and reassurance rolled into one. Public opinion confirms her strength. Polls in June 2025 showed Catherine with 74% approval, higher than William's 69%, and more than double Camilla's 28%. To the British people, Catherine is not just William's wife. She is Diana's echo, Elizabeth's heir in spirit, and the monarchy's quiet shield. Her composure may be the monarchy's last, best chance at survival. But while Catherine anchors, William faces a crossroads. Charles's final wish is a roadmap, but not a command. Should William honor it, he carries his father's legacy. Should he reshape it, he risks breaking from tradition. And in this choice lies the monarchy's gamble. Charles's final wish. Charles's decision, drafted in late April 2025 and read by Anne in late May, is both revolutionary and reckless. No monarch in the last 100 years has attempted to redefine roles so openly. Elizabeth II ruled for 70 years by following tradition, never altering succession or family status. Charles, facing death, chose disruption instead. The plan itself is layered. William inherits, but not absolutely. Catherine becomes strategist, but without formal authority. Harry is acknowledged, but excluded. Camilla is erased, but not named. Each choice is designed to protect the monarchy's image, but each also carries risk. Acknowledging Harry without empowering him may only deepen resentment. Elevating Catherine may provoke whispers about gender and precedent. Excluding Camilla may inflame old scandals. For William, the dilemma is crushing. On June 1, 2025, just days after Windsor, he reportedly told a close aide, "I don't know if Father has given me a shield or a storm." He must decide whether to honor Charles's gamble or reshape it in his own image. Either choice will define not only his reign, but the monarchy's survival. Charles's legacy is uncertain. If his plan works, history will call him the monarch who restructured survival. If it fails, he will be remembered as the king who gambled with tradition at the end of his life. Either way, the monarchy will never look the same again. And so the crown stands at a cliff edge. The king's words have been spoken, the plan delivered. What remains is execution, and the future hangs on William's choices. Will Charles's gamble hold, or will the monarchy fracture under the weight of its own reinvention? The future on the edge of reinvention. As of June 2025, the monarchy is suspended between past and future. Charles, weakened by illness, remains king in title, but his role is fading. William and Catherine, already carrying 80% of engagements this year, function as monarchs in training. Anne, the trusted enforcer, ensures order with her discipline. And Harry, the unpredictable element, looms as both acknowledged son and potential saboteur. This fragile balance could last months or collapse within days. Public opinion tilts toward William and Catherine, who together command nearly 70% trust ratings. Yet whispers of Harry's possible retaliation hang over every headline. Every appearance by Catherine is dissected as reassurance. Every absence by William sparks speculation. And every retreat by Charles fuels succession rumors. The monarchy now stands where it has rarely stood before, on the edge of reinvention or ruin. Charles's final wish has bought time, but not peace. The crown's survival depends not on tradition, but on choices. Choices that William must make with Catherine's guidance, Anne's enforcement, and Harry's shadow lingering nearby. The meeting at Windsor was not just a family gathering. It was a handover, a gamble, and a warning. For the monarchy, the next chapter will be written not in ceremony, but in survival. And history will remember whether Charles's final wish saved the crown or broke it forever. Anne's confession, shared during a private conversation at Gatcombe Park on June 10, 2025, stripped away decades of royal secrecy. For the first time, she admitted that Charles's so-called final wish, written in April 2025 and read aloud at Windsor, was not about titles. It was about restructuring the family itself. She confirmed that Charles, at 76 years old and aware of his limited time left, wanted the monarchy to survive him, even if it meant breaking centuries of precedent. According to Anne, Charles refused to repeat history. He had watched his mother, Elizabeth II, ascend the throne at just 25 years old in 1952, abandoned by her uncle Edward VIII's abdication, and isolated in duty for 70 years. He carried scars from the 1990s, when his divorce from Diana in 1996 and her tragic death in 1997 nearly tore the monarchy apart. And now, faced with illness, Charles resolved not to leave William with the same fractured foundation. Anne revealed that his plan placed William as heir, but distributed influence to safeguard stability. Catherine, now 43, was identified as strategist and anchor, the modern face of continuity. Harry, aged 40, was acknowledged publicly but denied formal power. His role would be ceremonial, a symbol of inclusion without authority. Camilla, notably, was excluded. Her absence in the letter, Anne admitted, was deliberate. Charles did not believe the monarchy could survive tethered to her shadow. Anne's delivery of the wish at Windsor Castle on May 28, 2025, was sharp, blunt, and intentionally stripped of palace language. She told aides afterward, Charles wanted no spin. He wanted clarity. For William, the shock was immediate. Instead of inheriting unchecked power, he inherited a balancing act, protecting the monarchy while carrying his father's gamble. For Harry, the message was bittersweet. He was not banished, but he was not trusted. For Catherine, it was confirmation of what she had already become, the emotional firewall holding the institution together. The confession also exposed Charles's deep fear of retaliation. Anne admitted her brother often spoke of Harry's potential to write a second book, one that could surface after his death. This paranoia drove his compromise, acknowledging Harry enough to calm him, but not empowering him to destabilize the monarchy. Anne's candor revealed just how fragile Charles believed the crown truly was. Her words cut through the romantic illusions of monarchy. She described Charles's reign as a bridge, not a destination, a brief and painful passage between Elizabeth's stability and William's uncertain future. She confessed she had argued with Charles about excluding Camilla outright, fearing it would spark chaos. Yet Charles insisted. He believed history would judge the monarchy harshly if Camilla remained central, Anne said. Anne's revelation ends years of whispers and speculation. It confirms what aides only hinted at. Charles's final act was not ceremonial, but survivalist. He gambled by redefining roles, leaving William to either honor his father's structure or rewrite it entirely. The monarchy now stands at a crossroads, with Anne's confession pulling back the curtain on its most fragile moment in living memory. For the public, her admission is both reassuring and alarming. It shows a king who cared deeply about legacy, but also feared the cracks within his family. It highlights Anne's loyalty, not to individuals, but to the crown itself. And above all, it proves that even after decades of silence, the Princess Royal remains the monarchy's bluntest truth-teller.